Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Hey, everyone.
So today we've got this really interesting stack of sources. We're pulling from, well, everything. Clinical psychology, cognitive behavioral research, a lot of studies on language acquisition.
And we're using them to tackle a problem that is, it's arguably the number one thing that holds people back from getting fluent.
It really is. It's that feeling, that universal feeling of avoidance.
Yeah, you've done the work, you know. You've got the grammar down, you have the vocabulary lists memorized, and then the moment comes.
The actual opportunity to speak.
Right. In a meeting, ordering a coffee, talking to a native speaker, and you just retreat. You go quiet.
And that silence. It's almost physically painful sometimes. And our mission today for you, our listener, is to go way beyond just calling this shyness or being nervous.
We want to give you a clear, almost a forensic breakdown of the psychological engine that's running behind that avoidance.
We're going to define this core concept that all our sources kept pointing to, the fear loop.
Yeah, and this deep dive is really designed to give you a super detailed map of how that speaking fear becomes this self-perpetuating cycle.
A vicious cycle.
A vicious cycle, exactly. One that, and this is the crazy part, inadvertently trains your brain to believe that just communicating is a threat.
But we're not just here to diagnose the problem. The goal is to pull out the specific, the research-backed strategies that can actually break it.
We're talking stuff rooted in cognitive restructuring and real behavioral change. Things designed to shatter this cycle and build some real sustainable confidence.
Okay, let's unpack that and make it super relatable right now. Do you ever have that moment where you consciously, actively choose to stay quiet because you were terrified of messing up?
Mispronouncing a word or your mind just going completely blank.
Exactly. And then maybe 5 minutes later, you feel even more anxious because you just missed a chance to practice.
That spike in anxiety after you've avoided the situation, that is the entire engine of the fear loop.
It's a closed system.
Completely.
Wrong.
And understanding its 4 parts, its 4 crucial stages, is really the first step to getting any kind of control over it. We're looking at a mechanism that is actively blocking your progress.
So we have to dissect the trap before we can figure out how to get out of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start by charting out what the sources call the 4 miserable steps of this cycle. This is the anatomy of that linguistic panic. So step 1 is just the fear of speaking.
That's the trigger, the initial gut-level anxiety. Maybe your heart starts beating a little faster.
Or your palms get sweaty. I get that.
Yeah, or that feeling that I think is the worst, the sudden cognitive drain. It's that moment where you feel like every single word you've ever learned has just evaporated.
Gone.
Vanished. And that immediate feeling is just so uncomfortable.
And because it is so incredibly uncomfortable, that triggers the most predictable defense mechanism there is, which is step 2, avoidance.
You stay quiet.
You look at your phone, you pretend to be busy with your notes, you just let that split-second opportunity just slide right by.
And this, right here, is the core neurological problem. The immediate reward for avoiding is so, so powerful. You get this instant, momentary wave of relief.
Ah.
As soon as you avoid what your brain thinks is a threat, that surge of anxiety, that whole fight or flight thing, it just plummets.
And that short-term relief is what locks the whole loop into place.
It's the glue.
That relief is so deceptive, isn't it? It's so compelling on a physical level.
Yeah.
Because that immediate reward, it leads you straight into step 3, which is no practice and stagnation.
Precisely. You successfully avoided the potential embarrassment, yes, but in doing that, you got 0 minutes of practice.
0.
0 real-time feedback, 0 chance to actually use the grammar you've been studying. You protected your ego for a second, but you completely starved the learning process in the long run.
Which, of course, brings us to the most damaging part of the whole thing. Step 4, reinforce fear. So,
because you didn't practice, because you didn't take that one little brave step, you now feel less capable.
you feel less confident.
And inevitably, you feel much, much more anxious the next time an opportunity comes up.
And that new, stronger anxiety just feeds right back into step 1.
And the loop tightens. With every single time you avoid, you're basically confirming to yourself that the original fear was justified. You're building the wall higher for the next time.
So this whole mechanism, as you mentioned, it actually has a formal name in psychology, right? It's the vicious cycle of anxiety.
That's the one. The content might be about, linguistic mistakes, but the process itself is pure anxiety psychology. It's a relentless mechanism.
A painful internal reaction.
Right. Fear, shame, maybe intense self-consciousness about your accent. that triggers a protective avoidance behavior.
Which has a consequence, stagnation.
And the stagnation reinforces the original fear. It's this perfect, closed system that uses your own desire for comfort against your long-term goals.
I really want to zoom in on that avoidance response for a second, because that seems to be the pivot point in all of this. But, I mean, wait a second. If the goal is to communicate clearly, isn't the fear of making a mistake a valid fear? I mean, how do the CBT sources deal with that tension?
That is a fantastic question, and it's a crucial distinction. The CBT perspective doesn't say the risk isn't real. It's not about pretending there's zero chance you'll make a mistake.
Okay.
It focuses on the disproportionate response to that risk. A small risk of saying the wrong word is valid, sure, but the catastrophic internal meltdown, the overwhelming fear that forces you into total avoidance, that's what's disproportionate.
So it's the scale of the reaction.
Exactly. And that moment of avoidance is where the brain learns the wrong lesson.
Okay, so how does that immediate relief trick the brain so effectively? What's happening on a chemical level?
Well, the sources that get into the neurochemistry of anxiety explain this really well. When that anxiety spikes, when you feel that dread, your body's flooded with stress hormones, right? Like cortisol.
It's the bad stuff.
The bad stuff. It's exhausting. It's unpleasant. So when you choose to avoid, when you stay quiet, the threat is instantly removed. Your brain registers a rapid drop in cortisol, and it might even get a little hit of dopamine for successfully carrying out a safe behavior. It's a reward.
So it's a profound physical reward. Your brain is thinking, okay, crisis averted. That action staying silent worked. Let's remember that for next time.
You've got it. You are, without realizing it, training your own brain through negative reinforcement. The avoidance, even though it's terrible for your learning, gets this massive immediate chemical reward.
So by trying to protect myself, I'm actually teaching my brain that speaking is genuinely dangerous and that silence is the best way to escape.
That's the cruel irony of the whole loop. Silence becomes the successful escape route.
Let's make this really concrete. Let's apply this whole mechanism to that meeting scenario the sources gave us.
Okay, so imagine you're sitting in a team meeting, and it's mostly in English. You've done your homework, you've prepped for hours, and you have a really solid, data-backed insight you want to share.
So you have the desire. You want to contribute.
You want to. But just as there's a pause in the conversation, the floor opens up, and bam, the fear loop triggers.
You start picturing yourself stumbling over a word, or you forget a key phrase, or maybe you just become suddenly painfully aware of your accent.
The anxiety flood is instant, your focus narrows, your mouth feels dry. So what's the result?
You choose the path of least resistance. You stay silent. You let the moment pass.
And you tell yourself something like, someone else will probably say it anyway.
And the short-term relief kicks in. The anxiety just vanishes. It feels great for a second. But now comes the really critical part, the cognitive aftermath. Later that day.
This is where the self-punishment starts. Your inner voice just starts screaming at you. I failed. I didn't speak up. My English must be absolutely terrible.
Everyone in that room must think I'm incapable or unintelligent.
Right. And the sources are so clear that this brutal self-judgment is a complete misreading of what actually happened.
You didn't fail because your English was bad.
Yeah.
You failed to speak because your body's anxiety response was just overwhelming, and you listened to that impulse to avoid.
Correct. But that self-judgment, that becomes the negative consequence. And it dramatically increases your fear for the next meeting. Why? Because the avoidance didn't solve the problem. It just moved the anxiety from out there in the social world to in here in the form of shame.
And if that pattern gets dug in, the sources say the consequence becomes structural. It gets bigger.
Oh, yeah. You might start actively skipping the optional after-work drinks or always deferring to a colleague to present the data. You literally start designing your life to minimize your exposure to spoken English.
You're now systematically destroying your own learning opportunities based on a false belief. The belief that silence equals safety.
And that's the ultimate danger here. It's an active process of digging the hole deeper. The real enemy isn't making a mistake. The enemy is the avoidance response, because that's the action that validates the fear and keeps the whole vicious cycle spinning.
So if the enemy is avoidance, and avoidance is chemically rewarded by the brain, the solution has to involve consciously overriding that reward system.
Yes.
By proving somehow that speaking is survivable, even if it's clumsy and imperfect.
That is absolutely right. The entire goal of what we're about to talk about next is understanding how to collect enough evidence to contradict the fear loop story. Evidence that proves speaking, even imperfectly, does not lead to disaster.
Okay, we've spent a good amount of time really identifying that behavioral trap, the cycle of avoiding and then stagnating. But now let's turn our attention inward, because the fear loop isn't just about actions. It's constantly being fed by our internal dialogue.
The hidden trap, the negative thought loops.
Right.
We're really talking about what psychologists call catastrophic forecasting. It's that inner voice that just defaults to doom thinking.
And the source research gives some great examples of this. Things like specific cognitive distortions like mind reading. I just know they're all judging my accent.
Or fortune telling, I'm going to get halfway through my sentence and just totally freeze up. It's going to be so embarrassing.
These thoughts, they're not just, annoying background noise. They are incredibly powerful because they shape your expectations. And critically, they influence your body's physical reaction before you even open your mouth.
And that connects directly to this huge psychological concept that just sabotages success. It's known as the self-fulfilling prophecy, the SFP.
The SFP. This is where the mental and the physical damage really collide.
They do. One of the sources we looked at explains it perfectly. It says that if you walk into a conversation absolutely convinced you're going to perform poorly, your body starts preparing for that failure.
But how does the thought physically cause the failure? What is the actual mechanism that makes you freeze or start mumbling?
It's a fascinating mechanism, and it's all tied to working memory and cognitive load. Think about it. Producing language, especially a foreign language, relies so heavily on your working memory. You're holding the sentence structure, you're recalling vocabulary, you're monitoring your own grammar, and you're listening to the other person all at the same time.
That's a lot to juggle.
It's a huge cognitive load. So when panic hits, your brain's resources are immediately diverted. They're pulled away from language and sent to manage the perceived threat.
So the panic just eats up all the available processing power.
Exactly. The cognitive load required to manage that overwhelming anxiety, the internal screaming, the hyper-awareness of your heart beating is so high that it literally starves the language centers of your brain of the resources they need.
So you actually run out of mental bandwidth for grammar.
You literally run out of working memory. That's why you freeze up or mumble. It's a physical resource allocation failure that's caused by panic. It is not a sign of a deep linguistic skill deficit.
And so the interaction does go poorly. You stammer or you freeze or you just bail entirely and your internal verdict is confirmed. See, I knew I was terrible at this.
The prophecy fulfills itself. The conversation went badly, not because your fundamental English skills are awful, but because the toxic mindset you carried into it triggered a cognitive freeze-up.
And that provides this powerful but totally false evidence that the fear was correct all along.
Which feeds right back into the fear loop we just mapped out, making the whole cycle even stronger next time.
This is why just telling someone, don't be nervous, is the most useless advice ever.
It's completely pointless.
You have to actively go in and restructure that internal monologue. And this is where the techniques from cognitive behavioral therapy, specifically something called cognitive restructuring, become so essential.
Cognitive restructuring is this systematic process. It's about identifying, challenging, and then replacing those unhelpful, catastrophic thoughts.
And it's not about forcing yourself to be optimistic, right? It's not toxic positivity.
Not at all. The goal is to move from these fear-based judgments to reality-based observations. You basically become a detective, and your thoughts are on trial, you're testing the evidence.
Okay, let's break down the practical steps. Drawing from the Dallas CVT source material, step 1 is just identify. You have to catch the negative thought in the act, I'm going to fail.
Then step 2 is challenge. This is where you cross-examine the thought. You have to ask yourself, is this thought 100% true? What is the actual evidence that supports this claim? And what is the evidence against it?
So if the thought is, I'll never be good enough.
The challenge is, wait a minute, is that true? Haven't I successfully written complex emails in English? Didn't I successfully order food for my entire family on vacation? That directly contradicts the word never.
So it moves you away from that black and white all or nothing thinking,
Yeah.
and it introduces some nuance.
A huge amount of nuance. And that leads to step 3, which is replace or reframe. This is the thought swap. You consciously replace that catastrophic, illogical assumption with a more balanced, realistic, and frankly, kinder statement.
Okay, let's go back to that specific example of a thought swap. The old fear-based catastrophic thought is, if I make mistakes, everyone in this room will think I'm stupid.
So the reframed thought has to incorporate that reality check and some self-kindness. It becomes something like, everyone makes mistakes. Mistakes are a totally normal part of learning anything new.
And even if I do slip up, It doesn't define my worth or my intelligence. My value as a person isn't tied to my momentary fluency.
The power in that shift is just transformative. The first thought is this paralyzing judgment of your entire character. The second thought is a simple statement of fact that acknowledges imperfection is okay. It doesn't invite shame.
And when you can successfully reframe that core negative belief, you fundamentally lower the stakes of the whole interaction.
You do. You move from believing a mistake equals a complete disaster to realizing that a mistake just equals, an opportunity to learn something.
And that shift frees up those cognitive resources we were just talking about.
It returns that working memory capacity from panic management back to where it belongs, language production.
But restructuring isn't just about stopping the bad thoughts. The sources also talk about actively building a positive expectation.
This is where we use our own evidence to fight back against a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have to consciously retrieve and focus on past small successes.
So if you managed a short little exchange with the bus driver, that's evidence.
That's evidence. If you understood a really complex sentence in a movie without subtitles, that's evidence.
So you're creating a kind of defense mechanism.
Sure.
When the anxiety starts to creep in before a big meeting, instead of letting the doom thinking run wild.
You proactively flood your working memory with tangible, positive proof from your own life.
It's like cognitive inoculation.
That's a great way to put it. You're telling yourself, okay, the fear is telling me I'm going to fail, but the evidence says, last week, I successfully explained my project slides to the English-speaking client, and they totally understood me.
And that's not wishful thinking. It's an evidence-based defense against the lies your anxiety is telling you.
And it provides that one essential ingredient you need to break the physical cycle of avoidance, the courage to at least try.
Okay, so we've identified the core mechanism avoidance is rewarded by the brain. We've unlocked the cognitive key, restructuring the catastrophic thoughts. So now we have to move into the behavioral shift. How do we take that little bit of courage and apply it again and again to finally break the loop for good?
We have to design a system for ourselves, a system that guarantees small, repeatable successes. We need to pivot from therapy, just understanding the thoughts, to active training, taking the action.
So we've established pretty clearly that fear feeds on avoidance.
Yeah.
It's like its favorite food. So to starve the fear, we have to stop avoiding. But, and this is a huge but, the sources are very, very clear on the approach. Breaking the cycle does not mean throwing yourself into some extreme high-pressure situation.
That's such a common mistake, and it's often associated with this idea of total immersion, just throwing yourself onto a stage in front of 1,000 people when you're terrified.
What's going to happen?
It's probably just going to confirm your worst fears. You'll have a massive cortisol spike, and you'll just reinforce the terror loop, making it even worse.
So the process has to be more gradual, intentional, brave steps.
Yes. And the single overriding purpose of this controlled, gentle practice is to collect enough data points to prove to your brain that speaking won't lead to the catastrophe that your anxiety is predicting.
You have to prove that speaking is safe, that it's manageable, that it's survivable.
The key realization here, and our sources hit this point over and over, is that the catastrophic outcomes you're dreading,
Public ridicule, everyone laughing at you, harsh judgment.
they almost never happen in reality. The world is generally so much kinder and more forgiving than that fear narrator in your head would have you believe.
And even if, the worst happens, someone asks you to repeat yourself, or they gently correct your grammar.
Which is really the worst case scenario in most low-stakes interactions.
Right. Even if that happens, the sources note the crucial psychological outcome. The world doesn't end. You survive, you learn, and you move on.
That feeling of survival, the
Yeah.
simple realization that, okay, I spoke, I maybe made a mistake, but I suffered zero actual damage. That is the fundamental evidence your brain needs.
So each time you speak and survive, you chip away at the fear loop's power.
You do. So to maximize that feeling of survivability, we have to find these low-stakes practice environments, safe spaces.
Places where the cost of making a mistake is basically zero.
So you can focus purely on the action of speaking without the pressure of some external judge. And our sources outline 3 really excellent, gentle strategies for this critical starting phase.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first strategy is a classic, and it's maybe the safest of all. Talk to yourself in the mirror.
Now, I could hear some listeners thinking that sounds silly or maybe a bit childish. For our audience, what's the actual crucial neurological benefit that the sources say comes from this simple act?
Well, the neurological benefit is that you are externalizing the language. When you just talk to yourself in your head, you're skipping the whole motor production phase. But when you actually articulate the words out loud, your brain has to engage the motor cortex, the auditory feedback loop. You start to normalize the sound of your own voice speaking the language.
That's a great point. A lot of learners really dislike the sound of their own voice in a new language. It sounds foreign or strained.
It sounds awkward. Mirror talk lets you practice your pronunciation, your intonation, forming thoughts on the fly, all with zero social pressure.
So what's the best way to do this? Like, how long should you do it for it to be effective?
The goal here isn't accuracy, it's volume and flow. Set a timer for, say, 3 to 5 minutes, and just talk about a topic you know really well, your daily schedule, a movie you just watched, your hobbies.
And the sources really emphasize consistency over length here.
Absolutely. Do this every day for 5 minutes. Aim for a fluent flow and totally accept that you're going to make mistakes. The goal is just to prove to your brain that you can sustain a stream of conversation.
Consistency is key.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the second strategy? This one moves a little bit more into the social world, but it's still very safe.
Record a voice message to a supportive friend.
This one is brilliant because it introduces a real audience, but the interaction is asynchronous. It's not live.
Right. You control the whole editing process. You can listen back to it, you can delete it, you can re-record it 20 times until you feel comfortable sending it.
And the crucial part is choosing a supportive friend. Someone you know is going to be kind and encouraging.
The sources suggest that this provides a really tangible win. It proves 4 critical things all at once. I spoke English, I communicated an idea, I was understood, and I got a positive reply.
That sequence of events is concrete data that argues directly against the old avoidance story.
And you can raise the stakes so gently. Start by just telling your friend what you're doing this weekend. Once that feels okay, maybe move on to explaining a more complex idea from your work. The key is that your friend is on your team. The risk is minimal.
Okay, and the third strategy. This one is really crucial for building that real conversational muscle, for moving towards live interactive speech.
Chat with a fellow learner.
This one works because it levels the playing field psychologically.
Totally. Both of you are making mistakes. Both of you are probably struggling with word recall. Both of you implicitly understand the fear the other person is feeling.
So that shared vulnerability makes the whole environment inherently less judgmental than, say, speaking with a native expert. It just removes the pressure to be perfect.
It really does. And if a listener can't easily find another learner in their area, the sources suggest looking for online language exchange communities.
But with a specific rule, right?
Yes, with a rule. Dedicate the session to speaking only. The sources suggest setting a clear boundary right at the beginning, something like, hey, today we're just going to practice our descriptive vocabulary. Let's focus on flow, not on correcting each other's grammar.
So you establish an expectation of shared struggle. That makes the whole thing feel survivable.
And every single time a learner does one of these small acts, the mirror talk, the voice message, the chat, they are feeding what we call the confidence loop.
This is the virtuous replacement cycle. This is what eventually overwrites that old fear loop.
The confidence loop is the antidote. It works by just reversing the polarity of the old cycle. You speak despite the fear.
The outcome is survivable, it's manageable.
And so your fear level automatically goes down the next time.
It's the exact opposite of the vicious cycle, where avoiding the situation made the fear stronger. Here, taking action systematically weakens it.
Each one of those small, courageous actions is like a little dose of exposure therapy, but it's gentle, it's self-directed. You're desensitizing your own anxiety response.
And over time, all these positive, low-stakes experiences, they just accumulate. And they fundamentally replace the fear loop with a new, self-sustaining, virtuous cycle.
Your brain learns the new, more accurate lesson. Speaking is safe, and speaking is what leads directly to improvement.
So the core takeaway from this entire deep dive seems to revolve around consistency and, I like this term, micro-courage. Fear feeds on avoidance, so consistent. Gentle action is the only way to starve it.
And we have to stress, consistency is so much more important than intensity. It's not about waiting for the fear to disappear. It's about acting while the fear is still there.
That moment of acting, despite the anxiety,
Yeah.
that's the crucial moment of neurological re-education.
It is. And there's one final critical step in this whole process. It's conscious self-acknowledgement. Celebration.
Sources really encourage you to make this part of your training. Don't wait until you deliver a perfect 5-minute presentation. You have to celebrate the 2-sentence successful chat you had with the shop clerk.
You have to verbally, either internally or out loud, link the action to a positive emotional reward. You have to say to yourself, okay, I felt anxious, but I chose action over avoidance, and I survived.
And that conscious celebration is so essential because it provides the neurological reinforcement. It teaches your brain that speaking is the rewarding behavior.
And that's what cements the confidence loop.
So this slow accumulation of small celebrated wins, the gentle exposure, the cognitive restructuring, the consistency, that's how the brain slowly but surely relearns the rules of engagement.
That's how the vicious cycle of fear becomes a self-sustaining, virtuous cycle of growing confidence and, eventually, of fluency.
You know, the learners who progress the fastest, it's often not the ones with the most innate talent or the biggest vocabulary.
It's the ones who develop the ability to consistently choose micro-courage over avoidance, but in these safe, low-risk scenarios. So, to summarize the key insight from today's deep dive, that paralyzing fear of speaking, it's not primarily reinforced by your grammar errors. It is reinforced by the powerful, short-term chemical reward that your brain gets from the choice to avoid.
And that choice inadvertently trains your brain to treat the simple act of speaking as a genuine threat.
So the path to freedom is this two-pronged attack. First, cognitive restructuring to replace that catastrophic self-talk with more realistic, kinder self-assessment.
Which frees up your working memory. And second, behavioral training through gentle, consistent, low-stakes practice mirror talks, voice messages, learner chats, all to collect evidence that proves speaking is survivable, safe, and worthwhile.
We've outlined how that self-fulfilling prophecy works by just eating up your cognitive resources, and how you can reverse it by actively remembering your small successes. You now have the mechanics of the confidence loop.
So here is the final provocative thought we want to leave you with, based on this whole principle of breaking the loop through evidence gathering and micro-courage.
If your brain currently learns that avoidance equals safety, what is one single, specific, 2-sentence action you could commit to taking in the next 24 hours to begin providing new, contradictory evidence?
Make it tiny, make it deliberate, and make sure you celebrate the survival, not the perfection.
That one small, brave choice is the key that unlocks the door to fluency.
Find your brave 2 sentences and start building your confidence loop today. We'll see you next time for the deep dive.